Hey guys, welcome back. So today we're out at the range to talk about the new XM177 from Palmetto State Armory, or PSA. Now, the XM177 is a classic M16 derivative, if you will. The gun was originally developed in the early or mid 1960s, I should say, and it would go through a number of different evolutions before it was picked up by Mac v. SOG in Vietnam, and then by the early 1970s, they had pretty much dropped the entire program, but that left a lasting impression on the US gun buying market, myself included. As a kid, the XM177E2 is this iconic firearm from the Vietnam War. Now, whether or not it was loved by the troops that actually used it, we may delve into that in today's video, we'll see. But the gun, nonetheless, is extremely iconic, very identifiable to most people that love the AR-15 M16 like myself. Now, in my hands, I have a firearm from that era, and this is a Colt carbine, a CAR 15, if you will, but this is actually called SP1 carbine. But this would be related to the XM177 E1 and E2 rifles. There never was an XM177, there's just the E1 and the E2. We'll talk about the differences. But this would be something that civilians could buy back then that would be close to that firearm. Of course, it has to meet the regulations of the Gun Control Acts of 1934 and 68. So it has this stupidly long 16-inch barrel versus the either 10-inch or 11.5-inch barrel that would be commonly found on the XM170 series of rifles, or the GAU-5 that the Air Force would adopt. But anyway, so this gun is iconic in its own right and no longer in production. But that's where PSA comes in, because you can buy a rifle that looks just like this one, or you can go a step further and get the XM177E2. Now, on top of this one, I have an original Colt optic, but these are being reproduced now. Brownells is selling them. They even have the Colt markings on them now, and they're being manufactured in the same Japanese factory that manufactured these originals back in the 60s and 70s. So it's pretty cool that those are back out there. So you can actually literally have this exact same rifle without paying the prices for an SP1 carbine. So let's get started with today's video talking about the XM177E2 from PSA/Harrington Richardson. A lot of folks ask me, how can I get involved in the firearms business in that particular community? And one of the best ways to do that is to become a gunsmith. Every gunsmith I know is just overbooked with work. It's a very good living. And so if you would like to become a gunsmith, you need to go to a gunsmithing school or become an apprentice for an existing gunsmith. But Modern Gun School is an accredited college that also works with veterans in the GI Bill, where you can go and get a degree from accredited college in gunsmithing and then go out and start your own gunsmithing business, which I think is a really great option. Again, throughout my entire life, gunsmiths have always been able to earn a really good living, assuming they have a really strong work ethic. So please check out Modern Gun School. I do have a link in the video description below. This is the new XM177E2 from PSA/Harrington Richardson. Now, the Harrington Richardson name is a name that was actually tapped back during the Vietnam War to manufacture M16s for the war effort. But they generally only manufactured M16A1s. Now, a clone does exist from PSA of that rifle. We featured it here on the channel before. But H&R was around developing firearms for the military during the Vietnam War. They were working on their own carbine. I believe theirs was based on the HK33. I'd have to look that up, but they were working on their own carbine versions. They were trying to sell to the government. Armalite, of course, was working on variations of the M16 as well, and Colt was doing its own research and development too. So you had a bunch of people that were modifying M16s, and by the time the 80s rolled around, Colt and those people working with Colt had developed just about everything you can imagine. Today we think 9mm AR-15s are new. They're not. Colt did that. Belt-fed AR-15s like the MCR/Shrike. Nope, Colt did that in the 60s, 70s as well. I mean, they did all sorts of really cool stuff. The DOE 9mm, you have the XM177s, and all these different variations of the gun. And PSA, to their credit, and H&R are doing their best to use the H&R brand to bring back firearms like this one and many, many others. They've showcased some really cool stuff like the DOE 9mm, and also they're talking about the Colt LMG, which is a rare variation that was also developed that fired from the open bolt. Of course, their semi-automatic would be from the closed bolt, but it looks the part with the unique handguard and stuff like that. Back to the XM177E2. So the 177E2 is a rifle that was worked on during the Vietnam War. It was technically classified as a submachine gun. Now, many times when you think of a submachine gun, you think of a pistol caliber cartridge being used in it, like 9mm. But that's not necessarily the case. Even the South Koreans, with their K1 and K2 rifles, the K1 is a submachine gun, but chambers 5.56. And so that is a common thing to do. So don't let that throw you off. So it was originally a submachine gun. And Colt would call it the Car 15, and then it would get picked up by the U.S. military as the XM177E1, and then the E2. The E1 would have a 10-inch barrel. This muzzle device would be pretty much up against the front sight block. Later versions would have an 11.5-inch barrel that would help resolve some of the issues which we'll talk about in this video that the XM177 had. And then we'll talk about this unique muzzle device, which is very iconic in itself. This pretty much helps identify the entire rifle as an XM177 variant because of this really, really iconic muzzle device. But this thing served a very specific purpose, and we'll talk about that in the video. So this thing is absolutely beautiful. You'll notice the finish on it has the gray. It's also available with just a black anodization, but the gray would be period correct. If you take a look at the pre-castle nut, it has the right castle nut back here. They have recreated one of the types of pistol grips that were used back then. This one has a little bit thicker palm swell. There are more narrow versions like my original SP1 carbine has on it. A number of different types of pistol grips were used during those early years, and this would be very similar to one. We also see earlier XM177E2s that came to market, like what Brownells offered, had polymer buttstocks, but this is the proper cast aluminum buttstock. And that is something that people would pay a lot of money for. I think back in the day when I was trying to correct a Brownells gun, make it more clone correct, I picked up one of these stocks, and I think it was like $199. So they're more expensive, but they are, again, clone correct. And then it has the iconic round handguards that would later evolve into the A2 handguards that we saw in the full-size rifles that the military would use, Army and Marine Corps. So overall, with A1 upper, all that cool stuff. And if you look at the markings on it, it does have H&R on it, property U.S. government, all that stuff. It is laser engraved. It's not roll marked. I know some of you guys like the roll markings because of their, more correct features, if you will. The laser is really, really clean. Roll markings tend to be shallow and deeper in certain areas and stuff, have a very distinct look to them. But I'm fine with the laser engravings. But we'll take a little bit closer look at this rifle when we get it over to the table. Let's do some shooting with it. This thing is really, really cool. This is easily one of my favorite variants of the M16. This is a 25-round replica early magazine. So in the early days, 25-round magazines were tinkered with, but they were very quickly abandoned. 20-round magazines during the war were far more common. You would see special operations groups like MAC v. SOG who would adopt the XM177. They would use early 30-round magazines and stuff, but there were issues with those with reliability as well. So it wasn't uncommon to see the operators running 20-plus magazines, 20-round mags, when they would go out into the field because the 25-rounders and 30-rounders weren't quite there yet. All right, so let's go ahead and load it up. Just fun guns to shoot. Man, that takes me back to my youth, guys. I so loved this rifle as a kid. Now, back in my day, DPMS and some other companies were making, I think it was DPMS, were making XM177 clones, but they would have the short 10-inch barrel, and they had this really dumb-looking muzzle device that kind of looked like this, but didn't. And so to get to that 16-inch barrel length, and so what they've done here is used a slightly longer barrel and put it out here. It's not quite correct, but again, they have to do this, pin and weld it to meet the overall length requirements of the barrel. And so it is what it is until we get rid of those stupid laws. So, beautiful rifle. Let's take a closer look. So let's start off at the rear of the rifle and work our way forward. Back here, as I've already mentioned, we have the proper aluminum style buttstock, and it's a two-position stock, so it's not a multi-position like a current M4. It's just two-position collapsed and extended. The rifle was based on the M16A1, so we have the teardrop forward assist. Now keep in mind, earlier versions of the rifle, like what the Air Force adopted, is a GAU-5, very similar to the XM177, with the exception that it did not have a forward assist, but the Army wanted the forward assist, and that is indicative of an E2 variant of the rifle, that being present. Have a nice, gray parkerized finish on the gun, which would be correct. We have a pretty clone correct pistol grip on it. Standard fire controls, a mil-spec trigger in here, Carpenter's 158 bolt with a full auto cut carrier. We have full fencing around here. We have push pins front and rear. Early Colts would have screws on the civilian rifles, not the military rifles. And then moving forward, we have the handguards, which are 6-hole versus, I believe, 7-hole later carbine handguards. So these are the clone correct 6-hole versions. And moving forward, we have no bayonet lug on here. The original XM177E1 would have this set all the way, this muzzle device set back all the way against the front sight block. Later versions, the E2 would have an 11-point I think 11.5 or 11.25, 11.5 inch barrel. And then this one has a 12.7 inch barrel with a pin and welded muzzle device of the correct dimensions with the grenade ring here. This again is to get it to that overall length of 16 inches. So the barrel's slightly longer than the XM177E2. And now it does have a 1 in 12 twist, and it is a chrome lined barrel. So you have the A1 sights on here. Everything seems to be pretty darn good in terms of being clone correct. And the other thing I wanted to point out is if you take a look, I already mentioned this, the castle nut doesn't have the castle cuts. This is an early ring, and you'll see the exact same ring on this early Colt right here, the hole in the side and everything. So they did a good job getting this rifle as close as possible to the original XM177E2. I'm already scratching my gun up. I hate it when I do that. But anyway, this is just a really, really iconic gun. We'll go ahead and take a look at the inside of it here, and you can see, my bolt's back, let's go ahead and put that forward. You can see that it has the mil-spec style hammer and trigger in it. This is not cut with the semi-auto notch in it. This would be a full auto hammer. Take a look at the buffer and spring really quick. Here's your carbine buffer and spring, the bolt and carrier. Once again, Carpenter's 158 bolt, and then we have the full auto cut carrier on it. Just a really, really nicely done gun. If you wanted a clone of the XM177, you just couldn't do better than this in terms of picking the rifle up and having, 98% there. For me, this is more than enough to be clone correct to actually enjoy shooting it and enjoy this classic style rifle. So the rifle itself is going to retail for right around $1,200. There's different versions of the gun out there. You can get it with or without the XM177E2 muzzle device. You can get it with just a barrel like you see on my Colt rifle there. You get it black anodized, be a little bit less than the gray parkerization. That bumps the price by about $100 or so. But even at $1,200 where this thing retails, that's not a horrible price for a clone correct XM177E2. While I have your attention, let's talk about this muzzle device here really quickly. So the early XM177E1s had that 10-inch barrel, and they ran into all sorts of functional issues. And there was also an issue with that really short 10-inch barrel with just a bird cage on it or something like that. The concussive force, the blast off the guns were really a problem for the U.S. military. They wanted to do something to mitigate that. So to increase reliability, to reduce that blast a little bit, they lengthened the barrel to that 11.5 inch barrel length. And then they would put this XM177E2 muzzle device on here, which was classified a sound moderator. ATF would later define this as a suppressor. What did it do? Some people would say that it increased back pressure to the system to increase reliability because the earlier guns were unreliable. That's not true. It doesn't purposely increase back pressure. That's not what its intent was. Its intent was it had multiple chambers in here, much like a suppressor, and it would trap those gases and reduce the flash and sound signature of the gun, making it more comparable to a 20-inch barreled M16A1. So that was the goal of this. But the muzzle device would quickly cake with carbon and copper from the jacket of the bullets and things like that, and it would plug up, and if not kept clean, it could cause accuracy issues with the 1 in 12 twist and the shorter barrel and this muzzle device. These rifles weren't known for stabilizing tracer rounds very effectively, and then once the muzzle device would get really caked with carbon and copper and stuff like that, then accuracy would become an issue. So the muzzle device wasn't great. And the fact that it changes the sound signature by 1 or 2 decibels is just a travesty that the ATF would classify this, an original muzzle device like this as a suppressor and require a $200 tax when the thing will blow your eardrums out still. But we're not going to go down that rabbit hole. Now, you also probably wonder where I got the sling. So this sling is very similar to what Troy would sell when they made their XM177 and GAU-5 clone rifles back several years ago. We did videos on those. And this would be a clone correct hastily made sling in the field by U.S. military forces. The strap would come from, I believe, like an ammo carrier, and they would just repurpose this old canvas slap. They would strap, and they would take the clips that would normally be on there, cut the clips off, use some paracord, and run the paracord around the front sight block, and then through the slits back here on the buttstock for a strap sling. And this would give them a very comfortable, lightweight sling to use with the rifle. I literally put this one together this morning. I ordered the parts off, I believe eBay is where I found the original. You can tell it still has the, these are brass fittings. You can see how it's corroded, the green corrosion from brass. Now, these are actual original slings. They're like $6 or $7. And you can pick them up, and then you just pick up some regular green paracord, and you can manufacture your own clone correct sling like I have for this particular rifle. So overall, absolutely love it. shooting these little carbines is a little bit different than, say, shooting a 20-inch barreled rifle, because you have a shorter gas system. It's tapping gas off earlier in the cycle, a little bit higher pressure gas, and it'll make the gun just a little bit more punchier. It's no different than an M4 if you shoot one of those. But overall, they're very comfortable, fun rifles to shoot, and it's just a 5.56. It's not like it generates a whole lot of recoil. Now, we have been shooting Federal ammunition. We do want to thank our friends over at Federal for supplying the ammunition free of charge to the channel. I've been shooting Federal ever since I was a kid. Outstanding quality ammunition and good stuff. Please check them out. All right, this is just a standard 30-round magazine. Have 10 rounds loaded. The Federal 55 grain stuff. Shoots really nicely. This is my 25 round replica magazine. Got this one from Brownells. It's just so cool. It's such a piece of history. And if you love the M16 as much as I do, it is just one of those things you just absolutely must have. So it's just really, really cool that PSA and H&R are putting this rifle together with the proper finish and clone correct parts. It gets it almost there, almost to 100% clone correct, which is just absolutely awesome. Love the guns. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video about the PSA/H&R XM177E2. Again, classic rifle. They're currently out there. Just jump on the PSA website and search for them. You'll find them. They'll go in and out of stock, but just keep checking back. If they're not in stock, you will find them. Again, the price, about $1,200, not horribly priced for a clone that's this correct. I think it's actually a good price, especially with the quality. Now, I've done a number of different videos on various H&R rifles lately, and this just being the latest, and I've had a great time with them. I think they're probably some of the best ARs out there for those of you that are looking to do military clone builds. It's a great starting point for many, many different rifles and more to come. So follow them, check them out. And with that, we're going to do a little bit of shooting and wrap up today's video. Guys, if you have any questions, you can ask those questions down below. I do try to stick around for the first couple of days after a video goes live to answer questions you may have. If you'd like to support us at the Military Arms channel, the best way to do that is to become part of our Patreon family. There I'll answer every single one of your questions because you have direct access to me through private messaging. And I also post stuff there that you won't get elsewhere. So please check out Patreon. There's a link in the video description below. Right here on YouTube, you got the thanks and join button underneath the video player you're watching right now. Mash either one of those buttons. You can help support us right here on YouTube in the age of demonetization. Thank you for 16 years of support. Swing by, check out Copper Custom, and we'll talk to you guys soon. Got one in there.